"You filthy black thief," Isabella snarled, her porcelain face twisted in rage, golden blonde locks whipping like flames as she lunged in the gleaming Manhattan penthouse kitchen. Steam hissed from the glowing iron in her manicured grip, the air thickening with betrayal's acrid bite. Zara, the young black maid with warm mahogany skin and eyes wide as Harlem Nights, crumpled to her knees on the cold marble floor. "Ma'am, please, it's my grandmother's heirloom," she begged, voice cracking like fragile glass, her simple uniform trembling against her frame. Isabella pressed the iron closer, the red-hot edge searing Zara's cheek. Flesh blistered purple in an instant, the stench of charred skin exploding through the room like a gunshot. Zara's scream ripped the silence, raw and primal, echoing off floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline. The penthouse door burst open. Alexander Hayes, the silver-haired billionaire in his tailored gray suit, froze mid-stride, briefcase slipping from his numb fingers. "Isabella, stop this madness," he roared, charging forward. He yanked the cord from the wall in a shower of sparks, the iron clattering like a fallen sword. Dropping to his knees, he cradled Zara's sobbing form, his thumb brushing the swollen wound. Tears stung his eyes as they locked on the pearl earrings dangling from her lobes, delicate crescents that unlocked a vault of buried agony. "My girl, how?" he whispered, Elena's ghost surging back, her laughter in Brooklyn lofts, her swollen belly under starlit bridges, the crash that stole her forever. What secrets simmer in those pearls? Will vengeance forge a new empire, or consume them all? The elevator hummed like a distant heartbeat, ascending through the steel veins of the Manhattan skyline, carrying Alexander Hayes toward the pinnacle of his empire. At 52, he was a man forged in the fires of Wall Street, broad-shouldered, silver-streaked hair, clipped sharp as a ledger's edge, eyes the color of storm clouds over the Hudson. But tonight, as the doors parted with a whisper, exhaustion clung to him heavier than the bespoke wool of his suit. The penthouse sprawled before him, a cathedral of glass and marble where fortunes were tallied and secrets buried. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, a glittering mosaic of ambition that mocked his hollow victories. He dropped his briefcase by the door, the thud echoing like a judge's gavel in the vast silence. Alexander paused, loosening his tie with fingers that trembled just enough to betray him. The air smelled of Isabella's signature perfume, jasmine laced with something sharper, like envy distilled. She was his anchor, or so he'd convinced himself these past 15 years, the woman who'd pulled him from the abyss after Elena. But anchors could drag you under, and lately the weight felt like drowning. He rubbed his temple, chasing away the ghost that never quite left. Elena's laugh, warm as summer rain on Brooklyn stoops, her dark curls spilling over his chest in stolen afternoons. God, how he'd loved her, fierce, unyielding Elena, with skin like polished mahogany and dreams that burned brighter than his boardroom conquests. Their affair had been a rebellion against the machine he'd become, a young wolf clawing for something real amid the deals and betrayals. But reality had teeth. Elena's pregnancy had shattered the illusion, her eyes wide with hope and terror as she whispered, "We'll make it work, Alex. For us. For her. Him. A daughter." The word had lodged in his throat like shrapnel. He'd promised protection, whispered vows in the dim light of her loft. But fear had won. Fear of scandal, of losing the ladder he'd climbed so ruthlessly. Isabella had found out, her discovery of a venomous serpent in their garden, and in the end, he'd chosen silence. Cowardice dressed as pragmatism. Then the call came. Elena's car, twisted metal off the Queensboro Bridge, her body broken, the unborn child gone with her. Police called it an accident. Alexander knew better, but grief had numbed him to the whispers of sabotage. He'd buried her with those pearl earrings, the ones he'd gifted her on a whim. Crescent moons etched in silver, symbols of the phases they'd chased together. Buried them, and himself, in a marriage to Isabella that was more mausoleum than union. Now, as he shrugged off his jacket, the penthouse stirred. Isabella emerged from the shadowed hallway like a specter in silk, her blonde waves cascading over a crimson gown that hugged her porcelain frame. At 48, she was still a vision. High cheekbones, sharp as cut crystal, blue eyes that could freeze a room or ignite it. The socialite who'd traded her own ambitions for his spotlight, or so she claimed. "Darling," she purred, gliding toward him with arms outstretched, her lips brushing his cheek in a kiss that tasted of obligation. "You're home late. The merger?" Alexander forced a smile, pulling her into a half embrace, her body yielding yet rigid against his. "Sealed it. Another notch." His voice was steady, the baritone that commanded boardrooms, but inside regret coiled like smoke. Holding her felt like clutching a mirage, beautiful but dissolving under scrutiny. Isabella's touch had once been a balm, her laughter a distraction from the void Elena left. They'd built this life on shared silences, charity galas where she dazzled on his arm, weekends in the Hamptons where whispers of their power couple status drowned out his nightmares. Yet lately her eyes held a glint of possession, as if he were a trophy to be polished, not a man to be loved. She drew back, studying him with that predatory gaze, fingers trailing his lapel. "You look drained. Let me pour you a scotch. Zara's off tonight, but I can manage." Her tone was light, but there it was, the subtle barb, the name dropped like a gauntlet. Zara Ellis, their maid of 6 months. The young black woman who'd slipped into their lives with the quiet efficiency of a shadow, her presence as unobtrusive as the city hum below. Alexander had hired her on a whim, through some agency Isabella vetted, drawn inexplicably to her resume. Orphaned young, bootstrapped through community college, a survivor in a city that devoured the weak. But it was more than that. From her first day, something about Zara tugged at him. The curve of her jaw, the resilient spark in her deep brown eyes. Echoes of Elena, faint but insistent, that made his chest ache. "Zara?" he echoed, moving toward the bar cart, the crystal decanter glinting under recessed lights. He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid, the burn of familiar friend. "She's been invaluable. That dinner last week, flawless." Isabella's laugh tinkled like breaking ice, following him as he sank into the leather armchair by the window. The city sprawled endlessly, a sea of lights that swallowed secrets whole. "Invaluable," she mimicked, perching on the armrest, her hand possessive on his shoulder. "She's competent, I'll give her that. But Alex, darling, she's watchful, always lingering, those eyes of hers darting like she's memorizing the silverware for a heist." The words dripped with casual venom, masked as wifely concern. Alexander sipped his scotch, the peat smoke curling in his lungs, stirring the embers of old guilt. Isabella had always been thus, territorial over their world, her insecurities blooming into thorns. It started small, complaints about the cook's attitude, the gardener's laziness. With Zara, it sharpened, whispers in his ear at breakfast. "She polishes your shoes too eagerly, don't you think?" As if loyalty were a crime. He set the glass down, turning to face her, the lines around his eyes deepening in the low light. "Isabella, she's staff, professional. Let it go." But his voice lacked conviction, frayed by the day's toll. Boardroom battles had left him raw, haggling over billions while his soul starved. What was a merger compared to the life he'd forfeited? Elena's face haunted him anew, her final voicemail, voice thick with tears. "Alex, they're watching me. Isabella knows. Come for us." He deleted it, coward that he was, and thrown himself into work. Now in the quiet hours, regret gnawed like acid. What if he'd fought? What if that bridge hadn't claimed her? The child, their daughter, might have had a father, not this hollow shell. Isabella's fingers tightened on his shoulder, nails digging just enough to sting. "Professional? She's 25, Alex. Single, with that glow about her, like she's waiting for something. Or someone." Her eyes narrowed, blue ice cracking with unspoken accusation. Jealousy, raw and unfiltered, pulsed beneath her words. A beast she'd caged since their wedding vows. Alexander had seen it flare before, at galas when other women laughed too freely at his jokes, or when Elena's memory surfaced in idle talk. But this felt different, laced with racial undercurrents she never voiced outright. Those people, she'd say of the help, they're grateful for scraps, but always hungry for more. It chilled him, a reminder of the chasm between them. He shrugged her hand off gently, rising to pace toward the window, the city a blurred watercolor of neon and shadow. You're imagining things. Zara's here to work, not to scheme. Yet even as he spoke, doubt flickered. Earlier that week, he'd caught Zara in the study, dusting his shelves, her fingers lingering on a photo from his college days. Him and Elena, arms entwined under autumn leaves, her smile radiant. Zara had startled, cheeks flushing, murmuring an apology before fleeing. The moment had lodged in him, stirring an inexplicable pull. Those pearl earrings she wore, simple crescent moons, had caught the light, and for a heartbeat he'd seen Elena's throat, adorned the same way. Coincidence, he told himself, but regret whispered otherwise. What if the past wasn't buried? What if it breathed right under his roof? Isabella followed, her heels clicking like accusations on the marble. Am I? Last night I found her in our bedroom, straightening your cufflinks, as if she has any right. Her voice rose, a silken thread fraying to wire. Alexander turned, heart thudding with a mix of irritation and pity. Pity for her, this woman who'd given him stability at the cost of his fire. Pity for himself, trapped in a cage of his own making. Enough, he said softly, cupping her face, thumbs brushing her flawless skin. We're better than this paranoia. Let's have dinner. Forget it. She leaned into his touch, eyes softening to sapphire pools, but the storm lingered. For you, darling. Always. Yet as she kissed him, lips cool, calculated, Alexander felt the fracture widen. Regret surged, a tidal wave crashing against his ribs. For Elena's lost light, for the daughter he'd never held, for the man he'd become, blind to the ghosts circling his throne. Down the hall in the staff quarters, Zara Ellis lay awake on her narrow cot, the city's pulse thrumming through the walls like a lullaby turned dirge. At 25, she was a fortress of quiet strength, her mahogany skin glowing faintly in the moonlight slanting through the blinds. Orphaned at 2, raised in Harlem's foster shadows, she'd clawed her way to this job, a foothold in a world that viewed her as invisible. The penthouse was her fragile sanctuary, its opulence a stark mirror to her own barren past. But tonight, unease coiled in her gut. Mrs. Hayes's stare had sharpened, laced with a disdain that cut deeper than poverty ever had. Watch yourself, girl, the housekeeper had warned. Zara touched the pearl earrings at her lobes, her only inheritance pinned to the blanket that swaddled her at St. Mary's door. Crescent moons, whispering of a mother she'd never known. Keep dreaming, her grandmother's voice echoed from memory, but guard your heart. She rose, slipping into her uniform, the crisp cotton and armor against the unknown. Tomorrow was another day of polished surfaces and hidden hurts. Little did she know, the shadows were closing in, and the man at the penthouse's heart carried regrets that would shatter them all. As Alexander retired to his study, the scotch warming his veins but not his soul, he pored over contracts that blurred into Elena's face. Regret wasn't a visitor, it was the host, and tonight it demanded tribute. The merger was won, but what had he truly gained? A wife who clutched him like a prize, a home echoing with unspoken accusations, and a maid whose eyes held the weight of worlds he dared not face. He drained his glass, the burn a pale echo of the fire he'd lost. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by bridges and what-ifs, the city lights winking like conspirators below. In the hush before dawn, the penthouse held its breath, a powder keg of buried longings and festering fears. Alexander stirred, unaware that the ghosts he'd interred were rising, clawing toward the light, toward a reckoning that would burn brighter than any deal he'd ever closed. Dawn crept through the penthouse like a thief, painting the marble floors in reluctant gold. Alexander Hayes lingered in the haze of half-sleep, the sheets tangled around him like accusations. Isabella's side of the bed was cool, empty, a void that mirrored the one in his chest. He'd risen before the city fully awoke, the merger's triumph soured by the night's unrest. Regret had clawed at him through fractured dreams. Elena's hand slipping from his in the rain-slick dark, her voice a fading echo over the bridge's roar. He dressed mechanically, the silk tie knotting like a noose, and stepped into the hallway where shadows still clung to the corners. The air hummed with the penthouse's quiet machinery, espresso machine gurgling in the kitchen, distant whir of the HVAC like labored breaths. Alexander paused at the study door, drawn by an inexplicable pull. There on his desk lay the old photo album he'd unearthed last night in a fit of insomnia. Elena stared up from a yellowed page, her smile defiant, one hand cradling the swell of her belly. The pearl earrings caught the morning light filtering through the blinds, crescents winking like secrets. His fingers traced the image, a tremor betraying the storm within. 15 years, and the ache hadn't dulled. It had calcified, a scar tissue heart beating beneath his ribs. "What would you think of me now?" he murmured to the empty room, voice raw with the weight of unspoken apologies. To her, to the child he'd never known. Coward. The word burned hotter than any boardroom loss. A soft clatter from the staff wing snapped him back. Zara. She started early, her routine a silent ballet of efficiency that both soothed and unsettled him. He moved toward the kitchen, drawn by the scent of fresh coffee, but halted at the threshold. Voices, low, venomous, filtered through the cracked door to the utility room. Isabella's, sharp as shattered crystal. "You're up early, girl. Can't sleep with all that scheming in your head?" Isabella's tone dripped honeyed poison, the kind that masked barbs until they drew blood. Alexander's pulse quickened, an old instinct flaring, the protector he'd failed to be for Elena. Zara's reply came steady, though laced with caution, like a deer sensing the snare. "Just finishing the linens, ma'am. Laundry's almost done. Can I get you breakfast?" A pause heavy with implication. Then the rustle of fabric, drawers sliding open with deliberate force. "Breakfast? Oh, how thoughtful. But first, let's see what else you've finished in my home." Drawers slammed, hangers clinking like chains. Alexander's stomach twisted. He should intervene, but his feet rooted, paralyzed by the echo of past silences. How many times had he let Isabella's tempest rage unchecked? For peace, for the empire, for the lie that this was living. Zara's voice rose, edged with alarm. "Ma'am, please, those are my things, private." "Private?" Isabella's laugh was a whip crack, devoid of mirth. "Nothing's private here, not in my house, not when I find you pawing through Alex's desk like a common thief. Lingering where you don't belong." The accusation hung thick and accusatory, stirring Alexander's blood. He'd noticed Zara in the study, yes, but her touch had been reverent, not invasive. Or had it? Doubt gnawed, mingling with the guilt that Elena's ghost amplified. Was this paranoia, or the unraveling of truths he'd long ignored? A gasp from Zara, sharp, involuntary. "The earrings? Ma'am, no. They're mine. Please don't." The sound of metal on tile, a jangle that pierced Alexander like a blade. Those pearls, his gift to Elena, now in Isabella's grasp. His breath caught, the room tilting as fragments of memory collided. Elena fastening them before a mirror, her reflection alight with promise. "Our little moons," she'd teased, "guiding us home." Home. The word mocked him now, this gilded cage. Isabella's voice swelled, a crescendo of fury unchained. "Yours! These aren't some Harlem trinket, you insolent girl. Crescent moons in silver, antiques worth more than your pathetic life. Stolen from my vanity, no doubt, to hawk on the street like the scavenger you are." The racial slur lingered unspoken but palpable, an undercurrent of disdain that Alexander had pretended not to hear in their private moments. Isabella's world was porcelain and privilege. Anything darker was a threat to be scrubbed away. Zara's plea fractured, desperation cracking her composure. "I swear on my grandmother's grave. They were with me when the nuns found me. Abandoned at St. Mary's steps, wrapped in a blanket with these pinned to it. They're all I have of her. Please, ma'am, believe me." "Believe you?" Isabella's scoff was venomous, footsteps pacing like a predator's prowl. Alexander edged closer, heart hammering, the door frame cool against his palm. He could picture it, Isabella towering in her silk robe, blonde waves disheveled from a restless night, her blue eyes blazing with the insecurity that had simmered since Zara's arrival. The maid's quiet grace had always irked her. The way Zara moved through their space without apology, her dark skin a stark contrast to the pale homogeneity of their social circle. It wasn't just jealousy, it was fear, primal and ugly, of being eclipsed by someone deemed lesser. The utility room door creaked wider under Isabella's grip, and she stormed into the kitchen, Zara trailing like a shadow pursued by light. Alexander slipped into the alcove, unseen, his breath shallow. Isabella clutched the earrings aloft, silver glinting like daggers. Liar! You think I won't check? Call the agency. Have you been blacklisted from every high-rise in this city? Zara halted, tears carving glistening trails down her cheeks, her uniform askew from the tussle. At 25, she was a portrait of resilient beauty, high cheekbones, full lips pressed thin against the onslaught, eyes deep pools of hurt that mirrored Elena's own. The resemblance struck Alexander anew, a punch to the gut. How had he not seen it sooner? Or had he and buried it deeper than Elena's grave? Zara's hands trembled as she reached out, not for the earrings, but in supplication. Ma'am, I beg you. My grandmother, she sang me lullabies about the moon, said these would light my way. They're not stolen. They're me. Her voice broke, vulnerability raw, exposing the fractures of a life pieced from scraps. Alexander's throat tightened, empathy surging like a tide. He glimpsed her file. Foster homes, dead-end jobs, a scholarship scraped together on nights spent cleaning like this. Survivors like Zara and Elena shared that fire, unquenchable, despite the world's attempts to douse it. And Isabella? She wielded her privilege like a club, bludgeoning anything that threatened her throne. The argument escalated, voices overlapping in a cacophony of accusation and defense. Isabella advanced, backing Zara against the island counter, the marble gleaming cold under the pendants. You people always have a story, pathetic orphan, reaching above your station. Alex pities you, that's all. But I see through it. The way you smile at him, linger in his study, scheming little. The word hung, half spat, and something in Alexander snapped. But before he could move, Isabella whirled toward the counter, snatching up the flatiron from its charging dock. The appliance hummed to life, the plate glowing an ominous red, steam curling like serpents from its vents. Zara's eyes widened in terror, her body shrinking back. Ma'am, no! Please, God, no! Isabella's face contorted, a mask of unbridled rage, the iron raised like a scepter of judgment. You'll learn your place, you thieving wretch! The words dissolved into a guttural snarl as she lunged, pressing the scorching edge toward Zara's face. Time fractured. The sizzle of heated metal meeting flesh erupted, a horrific, visceral sound that clawed at Alexander's soul. Zara's scream tore through the penthouse, primal and shattering, her hands flying up too late. The iron grazed her cheek, blistering the skin in a bloom of purple agony, the stench of charred flesh invading the air like a profane incense. She crumpled, sliding down the cabinets, sobs racking her frame as she clutched the wound, blood and tears mingling on the tile. Alexander exploded from the shadows, a roar ripping from his depths. Isabella! What in God's name have you done? Propelling him across the kitchen in 3 strides. He seized her wrist, wrenching the iron away with brute force, the cord whipping free from the wall in a spray of sparks. The device clattered to the floor, hissing defiantly, a black scar etching the marble where it landed. Isabella staggered back, eyes wild, the earrings still clutched in her free hand like spoils of war. She stole them, Alex. I caught her. But Alexander wasn't listening. He dropped to his knees beside Zara, the world narrowing to her pain-ravaged face. Gently, so gently, he pried her fingers from the burn, wincing at the raw, swollen flesh, purple welts rising like accusations against Isabella's cruelty. Shh, easy now, he murmured, voice cracking with a tenderness he hadn't felt since Elena. Tears blurred his vision as he shrugged off his jacket, pressing the soft lining to the wound to staunch the heat's betrayal. Zara whimpered, her body curling inward, trust warring with terror in her gaze. It hurts. Sir, please. The intimacy of the moment pierced him, regret flooding like a breached dam. This wasn't just a maid. This was an echo of his failures, a living reproach. Elena's face superimposed over Zara's. The same resilient spark dimmed by violence. The same plea unspoken. Protect me. He'd failed then, paralyzed by ambition. Not again. Hold on, he whispered, cradling her head, his free hand fumbling for his phone. Doctor's coming. You're safe now. But as he dialed, his eyes fell to the earrings dangling from Zara's other lobe, untouched by the chaos. Crescent moons glinting with cruel familiarity. His breath hitched, a sob choking in his throat. Elena's gift. On her daughter, the possibility ignited, a spark in the tinder of his grief, threatening to consume the lies he'd built his life upon. Isabella hovered at the edge, her fury fracturing into something uglier, fear, raw and exposed. Alex, she's lying. You have to believe me. But her words fell on deaf ears, drowned by Zara's ragged breaths and the thunderclap of Alexander's awakening heart. Regret wasn't abstract anymore. It bled, hot and immediate, demanding action. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, now reeked of betrayal smoke, and in that haze the ghosts stirred fully, ready to claim their due. The penthouse kitchen, once a bastion of sterile elegance, now pulsed with the aftermath of violence, a battlefield strewn with shattered illusions. Alexander Hayes knelt on the unforgiving marble. Zara Ellis cradled in his arms like a fragile relic unearthed from his own buried past. Her cheek throbbed with the iron's cruel kiss, the blistered skin a vivid purple testament to Isabella's unraveling fury. Each ragged breath Zara drew sent fresh waves of agony rippling through her, but it was the tremor in her frame that gutted him deepest, the raw animal fear of one who'd known betrayal before breakfast. Alexander's hands, calloused from signing away empires, shook as he held the jacket's lining to her wound, the fabric darkening with her pain. Breathe, Zara. Just breathe, he urged, his voice a low rumble laced with desperation, as if words alone could staunch the hemorrhage of his failures. Tears carved hot paths down his face, unbidden and unstoppable, mingling with the salt of her sweat. Regret wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a living thing, coiling around his heart with a vice-like grip. How had it come to this? His home, this fortress of glass and gold, was reduced to a stage for savagery. And Zara, God, Zara, her eyes, those deep wells of mahogany resilience, now clouded with shock and something sharper. Accusation. Not at him, not yet, but at the world that had taught her to expect such cruelty. She whimpered, a sound so small it cracked his soul wide open, echoing Elena's final gasps in his nightmares. It burns. Sir, why? Her question hung, innocent and devastating, piercing the armor he'd worn since the bridge. Why indeed? Why had he built this life on silence, letting Isabella's thorns grow wild while his own guilt festered? Isabella loomed at the periphery, her silhouette a stark silhouette against the morning light flooding the windows. The iron lay discarded at her feet like a slain beast, its plate still faintly glowing, casting erratic shadows that danced across her porcelain features. Her blonde waves hung disheveled, a crown askew on a queen dethroned by her own hand. The earrings, those cursed crescents, dangled from her fingers, silver mocking the chaos she'd wrought. Alex, she hissed, voice fracturing from rage to plea. She provoked me. The lies, the theft. Look at them. Proof. But her words faltered, eyes darting between him and Zara, the first fissures of fear cracking her facade. For the first time, Isabella glimpsed the chasm, not just a maid's defiance, but the unraveling of the life she'd clawed to claim. Alexander, her rock, kneeling before another woman, darker, damaged, drawing from him a tenderness she'd long coveted and never earned. He didn't look at her. Couldn't. The sight of Zara's burn, a brand of his complicity, fueled a firestorm within. 15 years ago, Elena had begged the same. Protection from Isabella's venom, from the shadows closing in, and he'd turned away, burying his love under boardroom conquests and wedding bands. Now history mocked him, replaying in flesh and blood. "Get out," he growled finally, the command low and lethal, not rising from his knees. Isabella recoiled as if slapped, the earrings slipping to the floor with a crystalline ping. "Out of this room! Now!" His tone brooked no argument. The billionaire's steel, honed by decades of deals, now turned inward like a blade. She hesitated, lips parting in protest, but the weight of his gaze, cold, unyielding, pinned her. For Isabella, it was a dagger to the gut. The man who'd once knelt for her proposals now defended the help. Jealousy, that old serpent, twisted anew, not just for Zara's youth or grace, but for the invisible thread binding her to Alexander's buried heart. "You're choosing her? Over me?" The words escaped as a whisper, laced with the raw edge of abandonment. Isabella had always known Elena's specter lingered, whispers in his sleep, the distant stare at Galas, but she'd silenced it with charm and control. Until now. Zara's presence had cracked the mirror, reflecting her own insecurities. The socialite who'd traded passion for power, only to find both slipping away. Alexander's phone buzzed against his thigh, the doctor's line connecting with frantic efficiency. "Dr. Lang, emergency, penthouse, Burns, now." He hung up, the click echoing like a verdict, and turned back to Zara. Her breathing steadied fractionally, but the pain etched lines on her young face, aging her in an instant. "The doctor will be here soon," he soothed, brushing a stray curl from her forehead, the gesture intimate, paternal. It felt right, achingly so, stirring a longing he'd suppressed for years, the father he'd never been. Elena's daughter, if the impossible held, deserved more than this violence. "Tell me about the earring," he pressed gently, voice barely above the hum of the city below. "All of it, from the beginning." Zara swallowed, wincing as the motion tugged her wound, but her eyes met his. Steady, searching. Trust was a gamble in her world, one she'd learned to hedge with caution. Yet in Alexander's gaze, she saw not pity, but a mirror of her own isolation. A man adrift in his opulence, haunted by ghosts she couldn't name. They were on me when the nuns at St. Mary's found me," she began, voice a fragile thread weaving through the tension. 2 years old or so, they guessed, wrapped in a threadbare blanket on the church steps in Harlem, winter cold biting like judgment. The earrings were pinned right there, like a tag no one wanted to claim. Her fingers twitched toward her lobe, the surviving pearl a talisman against the abyss. Sister Agnes said it was a sign. Moons for guidance, crescents for new beginnings. My grandmother, she wasn't blood, but she raised me in the system, told stories of a mother who loved fiercely but lost harder. "These are your light, child," she'd say. "When the dark comes, they'll pull you through." Her words wrapped around Alexander like chains, each syllable a key unlocking rusted vaults. Crescents, guidance, the very phrases he'd whispered to Elena under Brooklyn bridges, their hands entwined over her belly. "Our little moons," he joked, fastening the earrings with clumsy fingers, her laughter a balm to his ambition's scars. "For the daughter who'll chase them with us." The memory surged, vivid and visceral, Elena's dark eyes sparkling with promise. And now on Zara's ear, the same silver sentinels. Coincidence? Or fate's cruel jest, dangling redemption just beyond his grasp? His heart hammered, a drumbeat of doubt and desperate hope. If Zara was hers, their daughter, then every regret he'd nursed was a debt-demanding payment. The burn on her cheek wasn't just Isabella's sin, it was his, etched in negligence. Isabella, retreating to the breakfast nook, poured a trembling hand of coffee, the steam rising like her boiling resentment. She watched them, husband and maid, bound in this tableau of intimacy, and felt the ground shift. Zara's story, spun with such poignant simplicity, wormed under her skin, evoking not sympathy, but revulsion. How dare this girl, this outsider with her tales of orphan woes, encroach on what was hers? Isabella had clawed her way into Alexander's world, enduring his silences, his midnight murmurs of another name, all to forge their dynasty. Elena was dead, buried with her bastard dreams. Yet here was Zara, resurrecting her in flesh and silver. drawing from Alexander a softness Isabella had never fully claimed. Jealousy metastasized into paranoia. Was this a ploy, a long con by some Harlem schemer preying on his guilt? "It's a setup," she muttered to the empty air, voice laced with venom. "Those earrings, fakes probably, bought for pennies to hook a rich fool." But doubt crept in, insidious and cold. She'd seen the photo once, glimpsed in his desk drawer. Elena beaming, adorned with those very moons. Had Zara known? Stolen not just jewels, but his heart? Isabella's cup shattered in her grip, porcelain shards scattering like her composure. The pain in her palm was a welcome distraction, grounding the whirlwind. She needed control, agency, security detail, anything to reclaim the narrative. But as the elevator dinged, heralding the doctor's arrival, panic clawed higher. Alexander's back was to her, his world narrowed to the broken girl at his feet. For the first time, Isabella tasted true isolation, the bitter fruit of her own planting. Dr. Lang burst in moments later, a whirlwind of white coat and medical bag, his face etching concern at the scene. "Mr. Hayes, what happened here?" Alexander rose reluctantly, relinquishing Zara to the professional's care, but his hand lingered on her shoulder, a silent vow. "Accident with an iron. Second degree, I think. Please, make it right." As Lang applied cool gels and soothing ointments, murmuring reassurances, Alexander paced, phone in hand, dialing his lawyer with mechanical precision. "Greg, discreet. Background on Zara Ellis, full workup, and paternity test kit, rush it." The words felt foreign, absurd yet inevitable. Doubt wasn't a whisper anymore. It roared, demanding proof. Was Zara the miracle or the mirage? Elena's legacy or Isabella's undoing? Zara, under the doctor's ministrations, caught his eye across the room, a fleeting connection, charged with unspoken questions. Pain throbbed in her cheek, but deeper still was the bewilderment. Why this man, this stranger in silk and sorrow, looked at her as if she'd risen from his dreams. The earrings felt heavier now, not just heirlooms, but harbingers. Her grandmother's lullabies echoed faintly, moons pulling through the dark. But what darkness awaited? As Lang bandaged her wound, wrapping it in sterile white, Zara touched the pearl at her lobe, a talisman against the storm. Trust flickered, fragile as the city's dawn, but in Alexander's gaze she glimpsed possibility. A father, perhaps, lost and found. Isabella slipped away to the master suite, the door clicking shut like a guillotine. Alone, she sank onto the vanity stool, staring into the mirror at a woman fractured, eyes red-rimmed, hands stained with coffee and regret. She'd crossed a line, scorched flesh in a fit of possession, and now the house of cards teetered. Alexander's command echoed, "Get out," and with it, the specter of loss. Not just him, but the empire they'd built, the facade of perfection. Jealousy had been her shield. Now it poisoned her from within. "What have I done?" she whispered to her reflection, but the face staring back offered no absolution, only the hollow echo of a queen dethroned. In the kitchen, as the doctor packed his bag with promises of follow-ups, Alexander knelt once more beside Zara, the air thick with the scent of salve and unspoken truce. "You'll rest today. No arguments." His voice was gruff, protective, the father's instinct blooming fierce despite the uncertainty. Regret surged anew, not for the call to Greg, but for the years stolen, the life Elena had dreamed for their child. If Zara was that dream incarnate, he'd move heaven and boardrooms to atone. But doubt lingered, a serpent in the garden. What if the test shattered it all? What if she'd been under his roof, scrubbing his sins, while he dined on denial? The penthouse settled into uneasy truce, the city awakening, oblivious below. Whispers of doubt wove through the walls, binding them in fragile filament. Alexander's hope warring with fear, Zara's pain laced with curiosity, Isabella's rage curdling to desperation. The earrings, now reclaimed and tucked into Zara's palm, gleamed like omens, crescents heralding phases yet to come. Dawn broke fully, but in the haze empire, shadows lengthened, pregnant with revelations that would eclipse the sun. The penthouse thrummed with the fragile hush of a storm's eye, the city below oblivious to the tempest raging within its glass crown. Alexander Hayes stood sentinel at the kitchen's edge, the doctor's footsteps fading down the hall like retreating thunder, leaving behind a sterile scent of ointments and unresolved fury. Zara had been ushered to the guest room, insisted upon against her murmured protests, her bandaged cheek a stark white flag against her mahogany skin. Alexander's gaze lingered on the door, the wood a flimsy barrier between her fragility and the chaos he'd allowed to fester. Regret pulsed through him, not as a dull ache, but a vivisecting blade, carving open the compartments he'd sealed shut. Elena's voice echoed in the void. "Fight for us, Alex." And he hadn't. 15 years of silence. And now this girl, wounded under his roof, stared back with eyes that demanded the reckoning he'd deferred. He turned, the marble cool beneath his stocking feet, and found Isabella in the breakfast nook, her back a rigid line of defiance. Coffee pooled around the shattered cup at her feet, dark rivulets snaking toward the drain like spilled blood. She hadn't moved since the outburst, her silk robe clinging damply to her shoulders, blonde strands matted with sweat. The earrings lay discarded on the table, crescents mocking her from the saucer, their silver gleam a taunt to her unraveling poise. Alexander's chest tightened, a cocktail of pity and revulsion churning within. Pity for the woman who'd anchored him through grief's gale, revulsion for the monster she'd become, her jealousy a venom that poisoned all it touched. "Isabella," he said, voice low and laced with the gravel of exhaustion, crossing to her in measured steps. "Talk to me. What the hell was that?" She whirled then, blue eyes flashing like fractured sapphires, her face a war zone of smeared mascara and quivering lips. The vulnerability cracked open, raw and ugly, spilling words she'd bottled for months. "What was that? Me, Alex. Me, watching you slip away again. To her, to that dark shadow in our home." Her hands balled into fists, nails biting crescents into her palms, mirroring the earring's cruel motif. Jealousy poured from her, not as a trickle, but a flood, carrying the detritus of their shared history. From the moment she walked in, with her quiet steps and those knowing eyes like hers, Alex, Elena's. "You think I don't see it? The way you linger when she serves coffee, the softness in your voice? It's like she's back, haunting us, and you're letting her." The name Elena's hung between them like a guillotine blade, slicing through the polite fiction of their marriage. Alexander recoiled, the air thickening with the weight of unspoken indictments. Isabella had always known, of course. She'd been the one to unearth the affair, her discovery a scalpel to his jugular. But to voice it now, laced with such visceral hate, stripped them bare. Regret surged in him, hot and accusatory. He'd married her to silence the ghosts, to build walls around the void. But those walls had trapped her bitterness inside, fermenting into this. "Isabella, stop," he pleaded, reaching for her arm, but she jerked away, the motion sending the earrings skittering across the table. "Stop! You stopped, Alex, the day you chose me over her, over that pregnant tramp from Brooklyn. I saved you, from scandal, from ruin. And now this Zara, strutting in with her sob stories and stolen trinkets. She's Elena reborn, isn't she? Dark skin, dark secrets, drawing you in like a moth to her flame." Her voice cracked, the jealousy morphing into something primal, a confession wrung from the depths. Isabella had never been the villain in her own narrative. She was the savior, the wife who'd endured his nocturnal murmurs, the socialite who'd smiled through galas while he stared into his scotch. But Zara's arrival had ignited the fuse, the maid's unassuming grace, her resilience a quiet rebuke to Isabella's brittle perfection. It wasn't just race, though that undercurrent simmered unspoken slurs bubbling beneath her words, but the fear of replacement, of being the footnote to a love she'd never matched. Alexander's blood ran cold, then boiled, the dual assault leaving him adrift. He saw it now, clear as the skyline's jagged teeth. Isabella's barbs at staff hires, her disdain for those people with their endless appetites. It had started as classism, cloaked in concern, but with Zara, with her echoes of Elena, it festered into something uglier, a racial venom that shamed him by association. Regret clawed deeper, self-loathing twisting like barbed wire. He'd ignored the signs, too buried in deals to confront the rot in his own house. "You're wrong," he said finally, voice a hollow echo, stepping back as if her words contaminated the air. "Zara's not her, but if she were, God, Isabella, what does that say about us? About the life we've built on lies?" She laughed then, a brittle, shattering sound that echoed off the windows and swept her arm across the table in an arc of destruction. The saucer flew, shattering against the cabinet in a spray of porcelain shrapnel. The earrings clattered to the floor, rolling into shadow. Coffee mugs followed, crashing in symphony with her unraveling. Lies. Our life is no lie. Empire, Alex. Skyscrapers in your name. Galas where they envy us. I gave you that. While she, Elena, would have dragged you down to her ghetto dreams. The words spilled, unfiltered venom, her chest heaving with the force of expunged truths. Isabella collapsed into the chair, sobs racking her frame, the robe slipping to reveal shoulders etched with tension's map. Vulnerability peeked through the rage. A woman terrified of obsolescence, clinging to power as her only proof of worth. Alexander watched, torn between the urge to comfort and the revulsion that rooted him. Pity warred with betrayal. This was the woman he'd vowed to cherish, yet her hatred mirrored the worlds he'd shielded Elena from. Regret flooded him anew, a tidal wave crashing over the dams of denial. How many times had he excused her slights, chalking them to stress? Now, with Zara's scream still ringing in his ears, the cost crystallized. Flesh scarred, trust incinerated. He knelt amid the debris, gathering the shards with mechanical care, each fragment a metaphor for their fractured bond. "We need to stop this," he murmured, more to himself than her, the weight of impending truths pressing like an anvil. The lawyer's call burned in his pocket, the paternity kit en route, a Pandora's box he'd cracked open. If Zara were Elena's daughter, Isabella's jealousy wasn't misplaced. It was prophetic. From the guest room, a soft knock echoed. Zara, perhaps, drawn by the crash, or her own restless pain. Alexander rose, leaving Isabella to her tempest, and moved toward the sound. The hallway a gauntlet of polished indifference. The door creaked open to reveal Zara propped against pillows, the bandage a stark white island on her cheek, her eyes shadowed with the residue of trauma. She clutched a glass of water, fingers trembling slightly, but her posture held that unyielding poise, the survivor's spine that had drawn him from the first. "Sir, Mr. Hayes," she said, voice a whisper threaded with caution. "I heard breaking. Is everything—" He entered, closing the door softly. The room a cocoon of muted luxury, cream linens, abstract art on walls that whispered of travels she'd never afforded. Sitting on the bed's edge, Alexander felt exposed, the billionaire reduced to a man pleading for absolution. "Everything's a mess," he admitted, the confession spilling unbidden. "Isabella, she's hurting. We've all been." His gaze dropped to her hands, then lifted to the uninjured earlobe, where the surviving earring dangled like a pendant question. Regret softened his features, etching lines deeper than years had. "Tell me more about your childhood, Zara. The parts the nuns couldn't fill. I need to understand." She hesitated, the offer of intimacy a double-edged blade. Trust versus exposure. Pain throbbed in her cheek, a constant reminder of the morning's brutality. But Alexander's eyes held no pity, only a hunger for connection that mirrored her own buried longings. Zara set the glass aside, drawing her knees up, the uniform's hem pooling like forgotten dreams. "It was patchwork," she began, voice gaining strength as memory unfurled. "After St. Mary's, foster homes in Harlem. Good ones, bad ones. Mrs. Grady, my last. Wasn't blood, but might as well have been. She worked doubles at the hospital, came home smelling of bleach and mercy, but she'd sit with me under the fire escape, braiding my hair, telling stories of the stars. 'Moons guide the lost, baby girl,' she'd say, tapping these. Her fingers brushed the earring. a talisman against the tide. She died when I was 16. Cancer, quick and cruel. Left me with a shoebox of nothing but these pearls and a note. Find your light. So I did. Cleaned offices, waitress dives, scraped for classes at night. This job, it's my foothold. Not a dream, but steady. Her words wove a tapestry of quiet triumphs, each thread a defiance against the odds, and Alexander drank them in, Elena's spirit resurrecting in every resilient syllable. Regret clawed at him, visceral and unrelenting. This woman scrubbing his floors while nursing wounds he'd inflicted by neglect. What if she'd grown up in his world, not Harlem's harsh cradle? Fathered, cherished, not orphaned by his cowardice. Tears pricked his eyes, unashamed, as the weight settled. His empire, built on the bones of her absence, now mocked him with its hollowness. "You're stronger than I ever was," he whispered, hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. I, I've lost so much, Zara. People I should have fought for. If there's any chance, any, that you're part of that loss." The door to the suite burst open then, Isabella framed in the threshold, her face a mask of smeared fury and desperation. "Part of what? Your little fantasy?" She'd followed, the crash of her entrance shattering the fragile bridge they'd built. In her hand, a bottle of vintage Bordeaux, his favorite, a gift from their Hamptons escape, now wielded like a club. "You think her sob stories make her family? She's playing you, Alex, like Elena did, gold digging her way into your bed, then crying victim when I—" The bottle flew, shattering against the wall in a cascade of crimson and glass, wine rivulets tracing veins down the cream paint. Isabella advanced, eyes wild, the admission slipping half-formed. "When I made sure she left, for good." Alexander surged to his feet, shielding Zara instinctively, the pieces slotting with horrific clarity. "Made sure? What did you do, Isabella?" His voice was thunder, regret transmuting to rage, the protector awakening too late. Flashbacks seized him then, unbidden and merciless. Elena, fleeing their loft in the dead of night, belly rounded with promise, her voice trembling over the phone. "Alex, Isabella's men. They're watching. She threatened everything. The baby's kicking. Feel her? Run with me." He'd hesitated, promises dissolving in fear's acid, and the next dawn brought sirens, her car plummeting, brakes severed like fate's cruel edit. Isabella's family, old money, old sins, had buried the investigation, whispers of tampering dismissed as mechanical failure. But now in her slip the truth gleamed. Vengeance, not accident. Elena, dead by design. Their daughter erased before breath. Horror choked him, bile rising as he rounded on Isabella, the room shrinking to their triad of doom. You killed her. My Elena. Our child." The words rasped, each a flaying, regret's full inferno consuming him. He'd cursed himself in silence for years. But this, complicity in murder, shattered the remnants of his soul. Zara gasped behind him, the revelation a seismic shift, her hand clutching the earring as if it could anchor her. Isabella faltered, the bottle's shards crunching underfoot, her face crumbling from defiance to dread. I protected us. She was poisoned." "Poison?" Alexander roared, the penthouse walls seeming to lean in, complicit witnesses. "You were the venom, and now Zara. God, if she's—" He trailed off, the possibility a lifeline in the abyss, fueling the resolve that regret had long suppressed. The lawyer's text buzzed. "Kid arriving in hours. No more doubts. The test, we're doing it. And if it's true—" His voice broke, eyes locking on Zara's, a silent plea for forgiveness he didn't deserve. Isabella sobbed, collapsing amid the wreckage, her empire of illusions in ruins. Vengeance's veins ran deep, but in that moment Alexander glimpsed redemption's faint pulse. Truth, however searing, the only salve for wounds like these. The afternoon waned, shadows lengthening across the penthouse like accusing fingers, the air heavy with wine's tang and unspoken verdicts. Alexander paced the study, the paternity kit's sterile box a Pandora's box on his desk. Regret wasn't catharsis, it was a catalyst, propelling him toward the confrontation that would redefine them all. Zara rested, her stories a balm to his fractured heart. Isabella barricaded in the suite, her confessions a noose tightening. Secrets mounted, not as burdens, but beacons, crescents guiding through the encroaching night. Twilight bled through the penthouse windows like a bruise, the Manhattan skyline fracturing into shards of amber and indigo as the day surrendered to dusk. Alexander Hayes paced the study, the paternity kit's sterile box mocking him from the desk, a Pandora's vessel, sealed with the promise of absolution or annihilation. The air hung heavy with the ghosts of confessions, Isabella's half-spilled venom still echoing in his skull. When I made sure she left. Made sure. The phrase clawed at him, a revelation that twisted regret into something sharper, a scalpel dissecting his complicity. 15 years of blaming fate, of toasting mergers while Elena's ashes scattered in the Hudson's indifferent current. And now the swab results, rushed through Greg's labyrinth of private labs, lay unopened in his trembling hand, a manila envelope as innocuous as a death warrant. His heart thundered, each beat an indictment. Coward, father, fool. The study, with its leather-bound tomes and crystal decanters, felt like a confessional booth, walls closing in with the weight of what-ifs. What if the crescents proved true? Zara under his roof these months, not as maid but as blood. His daughter, Elena's legacy, scarred by the woman he'd bedded in denial. Regrets surge, not as abstract sorrow but a visceral flood, choking him with the phantom kicks of a child he'd never felt, the lullabies he'd never sung. Elena's face superimposed over Zara's bandaged one, her dark eyes pleading from beyond the grave. See her, Alex. See us. He tore the envelope, paper ripping like flesh, the lab report spilling forth in crisp black ink. His vision blurred, breath hitching as the words leaped. 99.9% match. Paternal. Biological. The world tilted, knees buckling as Alexander collapsed into the armchair, the paper crumpling in his fist. A sob tore from him, guttural and unrestrained, echoing off the oak panels like a soul's fracture. My girl, he gasped, the words a prayer and a dirge, tears carving furrows down his weathered cheeks. 15 years, stolen sunrises, scraped knees, first heartbreaks, all lost to his ambition's altar. Zara, scrubbing marble while he signed billions, was orphaned not by accident but by his silence. Regret consumed him, a bonfire of self-recrimination. He'd built towers in her absence, each brick mortared with guilt, and now the foundation quaked. Elena's laughter rang in his ears, her hand on her belly whispering, "She'll have your fire, Alex. Don't let it dim." But he had, dimmed it to embers, buried under boardroom ash. Sobs racked him, shoulders heaving, the billionaire reduced to a father, keening for the daughter fate had hidden in plain sight. The door creaked, Zara entering like a specter summoned, her steps hesitant on the Persian rug. The bandage shadowed her cheek, a stark reminder of the morning's inferno. But her eyes, those Elena deep pools, held a wary hope, drawn by his unraveling cries. She wore a borrowed robe, soft cashmere dwarfing her frame, the surviving earring glinting like a beacon in the lamplight. "Mr. Hayes, I heard you." Her voice was a fragile bridge, laced with the caution of one who'd learned to brace for blows, yet curiosity flickered, a spark undimmed by pain. Alexander looked up, vision clearing to her silhouette, and the dam broke fully. He rose unsteady, crossing the room in a blur, pulling her into an embrace that crushed the air from them both. "Zara," he choked, burying his face in her curls, inhaling the faint jasmine of her skin. Elena's scent, resurrected. "My God, my girl, it's you. All this time. You're mine. Ours." She stiffened at first, the hug a foreign territory, her body a fortress against the world's caprice. Foster homes had taught her touch as transaction, love as liability. But Alexander's hold wasn't possessive. It was anchor, desperate and devout, his tears soaking her shoulder like rain on parched earth. Zara's breath hitched, confusion warring with an inexplicable thaw, the earring warm against her neck, as if the moons themselves urged surrender. Yours? What? What do you mean? Her hands rose tentatively, clutching his shirt, fingers twisting the fabric as sobs bubbled in her throat. The revelation crashed over her, not as joy but a tidal bewilderment. The penthouse, once a gilded cage, now a cradle of origins. Grandmother's stories, moons and lost mothers, suddenly sharpened into focus. The blankets pin a breadcrumb trail to this man, this stranger father, whose arms trembled with the force of reclaimed years. Alexander pulled back fractionally, cupping her face with reverence, thumbs brushing the bandage's edge as if he could erase the hurt with will alone. The test. DNA. You're Elena's daughter, my daughter. I held her, your mother, in Brooklyn nights, promised the world. But I failed. She ran because of me, because of everything. The crash. I thought it took you both. His voice fractured, regret spilling in torrents, each word a confession boost's absolution. Zara's eyes widened, tears spilling free, tracing the uninjured curve of her cheek. Elena, my mother. The name tasted foreign, yet fitting, a puzzle piece slotting home. Images flickered, the nuns' tales of a fierce woman, dark and defiant, leaving moons as guides. Now flesh and blood, this man, silver-haired, storm-eyed, embodied the lullabies. Joy flickered, tentative, but grief shadowed it. The childhood's unlived, the holidays hollow. Why now? Why hide? He sank to the rug with her, knees protesting but heart insistent, pulling her close as sobs synced in ragged harmony. Fear, Zara. I was a coward, chose deals over dreams, silence over screams. Your mother begged me to run, but I stayed, married the nightmare that chased her. Regret clawed his throat, visions assaulting. Elena's voicemail, frantic and fading, the bridge's twisted guardrail and newsprint. He'd mourned in private, drowning in scotch while Isabella orchestrated their facade. Now, holding Zara, warm, real, breathing, the loss crystallized, not abstract, but a living void he'd filled with ledgers. I missed your first steps, your laughs, your pains. God, the pains. I should have shielded you from all of it. His forehead pressed to hers, breasts mingling, the earrings crescent pressing like a brand of belonging. From the hallway's shadow, Isabella eavesdropped, her ear pressed to the study door like a thief at the gallows. The revelation hit her like a freight train. Zara, not pretender, but progeny, Elena's spawn legitimized in ink and tears. Jealousy, that faithful fiend, transmuted to terror, her porcelain world splintering under the weight. She'd overheard the call to the lab, dismissed it as folly, but now Alexander's sobs confirmed the horror. Blood thicker than her vows, a rival born from the grave. Panic surged, hot and hypoxic, propelling her into the room unbidden, the door banging wide. No, she gasped, face ashen, blonde waves a wild halo in the lamplight. It's a lie, the labs, the swabs. She's conning you, Alex. Some orphan scam to bleed you dry. Alexander's head snapped up, arm tightening protectively around Zara, his tears drying to steel in an instant. The shift was seismic, regret fueling a paternal fury that eclipsed all prior tempests. Conning? The report's right here. 99.9% Isabella, my daughter. And you. You knew. His voice rose, a thunderclap that rattled the decanters, eyes boring into her with the force of dawning betrayal. Zara shrank against him, confusion yielding to fear, her hand clutching his like a lifeline amid the storm. Isabella advanced, desperation etching her features into something feral, hands wringing the robe's sash. Knew. I protected us. Elena came crawling, pregnant with your bastard, threatening my future. Our future. I warned her, leave or I'd make her. The confession tumbled, unspooled by cornered panic, each word a noose tightening around her neck. My family's men. The breaks. It was quick, clean. She went off that bridge thinking it accident. The baby. Gone with her. For us, Alex. For the empire we built from her ashes. The room froze, time suspended in the revelation's vacuum. Alexander's world imploded, regret exploding into cataclysmic rage, his body a coiled spring unleashed. He surged to his feet, Zara stumbling behind him, the report fluttering to the floor like a fallen banner. "You murdered them!" he roared, voice a primal bellow that shook the windows, thunder outside mirroring the maelstrom within. Rain lashed the glass, sheets of silver fury veiling the city, as if the heavens wept for Elena's stolen breath. "My Elena, carrying our child and you snuffed them out because of your poison. Jealousy, Isabella, not love. You stole my daughter before she drew air." Isabella recoiled, back hitting the bookshelf, volumes tumbling in a cascade of forgotten wisdom. Tears streamed, but defiance flickered, her blue eyes hardening to chips of ice. "Stole? I gave you everything. While that tramp would have ruined you, welfare lines, tabloid trash, I made us kings." Her sobs choked the defense, vulnerability cracking through. A woman who'd bartered her soul for a crown, now dethroned by blood she couldn't claim. Regret touched her too, fleeting and poisoned, not for the act, but the unraveling it wrought. Alexander's gaze, once adoring, now held only contempt, a mirror to her monstrosity. Zara, pressed to the wall, clutched the earring, horror etching her features, the bandage a twin to the wound in her soul. "You killed my mother?" The question emerged small, shattered, but it pierced Isabella like shrapnel, drawing a wail from her depths. Alexander turned, enveloping Zara anew, his whisper fierce against her hair. "I let her, baby girl. My fear, my silence, it killed them too. Forgive me. God, forgive me." Sobs renewed, father and daughter clinging amid the wreckage. The penthouse staff, drawn by the roar, peering from the hall, faces pale masks of shock. The butler, old Mr. Hale, clutched his tray, eyes wide. The cook averted hers, whispers rippling like aftershocks. Thunder cracked overhead, lightning fracturing the sky, illuminating the triad. Alexander and Zara, bound in blood's belated embrace, regret forging them unbreakable. Isabella, isolated in her storm, confession's venom recoiling to consume her. The revelation wasn't closure, it was ignition. Flames of truth licking at the empire's edges. Outside, rain hammered relentlessly, washing the city clean, but in the Hayes penthouse, sin stained indelible, demanding a justice as merciless as the night. Rain hammered the penthouse like judgment's relentless drum, the storm outside a symphony to the one raging within. Alexander Hayes stood frozen in the study's wreckage. Zara pressed against him, her sobs a counterpoint to the thunder's growl. The air reeked of wine's sour tang and ozone's sharp betrayal, shards of Isabella's shattered bottle crunching underfoot like the brittle remnants of their vows. His arm encircled Zara, his daughter, flesh of his flesh, miracle and indictment, shielding her from the woman who'd orphaned her before birth. Regret had evolved, no longer a passive specter, but a forge, hammering his soul into resolve. Elena's ghost lingered in the room's corners, her eyes, Zara's eyes, watching with a forgiveness he craved, but feared he'd never earn. "It's over," he whispered to Zara, voice a gravel vow against her temple. But the words echoed hollow, for endings birthed beginnings, and this one demanded sacrifice. Isabella slumped against the bookshelf, her robe a sodden ruin, blonde waves plastered like a drowned halo. The confession hung from her lips like venom expelled. Her blue eyes, once sapphire sirens, now dulled to storm-tossed slate, pleading for the absolution she'd poisoned away. "Alex, please," she rasped, crawling forward on hands and knees, glass biting her palms unnoticed. Blood welled, crimson beads tracing her porcelain skin, a macabre mirror to the empire's lifeblood she'd guarded so jealously. Vulnerability stripped her bare, not the socialite queen, but a woman hollowed by her own machinations, the crown of their union slipping from her grasp. "I did it for us, for the life we dreamed. Galas, heirs in our image, not hers. Forgive me. We can bury this, like before." Her fingers clawed at his trouser leg, desperation etching her face into something pitiable. A queen reduced to a beggar at the feet of the king she'd crowned. Pity flickered in Alexander, a dying ember amid the inferno. Pity for the girl he'd courted in Hampton's haze. Her laughter a fragile bridge over his grief. But it guttered, extinguished by the tidal rage of revelation. Elena's final screams, the bridge's merciless plunge, Zara's unlived years scrubbing shadows while he dined on denial. Regret transmuted to justice's blade, cold and unyielding. He knelt slowly, prying her hand free with deliberate gentleness, his touch a eulogy for what they'd been. Bury it? You buried them, Isabella. My love, my child, and now this one. He glanced at Zara, her face buried in his shoulder, body trembling with the aftershocks of truth. You scarred her too, in my home. No more graves, no more your shadows. Rising, he pulled Zara with him, her weight and anchor grounding his fury, fatherly instinct blooming fierce and protective. The staff clustered in the doorway, a silent chorus of wide-eyed witnesses. Mr. Hal, the butler, tray forgotten in white-knuckled grip. The cook, apron twisted in anxious folds. Even young Thomas the valet, phone half raised before Hale's glare, stayed him. Their faces mirrored the room's tableau, shock etched in furrowed brows, whispers stifled by the gravity of glimpsed horrors. Alexander met their gazes, not with command but confession, the billionaire's mask fracturing to reveal the man beneath. You all saw, he said, voice steadying, laced with the raw edge of catharsis. What happened here? What's always happened? No NDAs this time. Speak if you must. The truth. It's free now. Murmurs rippled, nods exchanged, loyalty shifting not to empire, but to the human unraveling before them. Hale stepped forward, voice gravelly. Sir, we've ears but no tongues for harm, whatever comes. Gratitude swelled in Alexander, a balm to isolation's sting, finally allies in the light. Isabella lunged then, desperation cresting to hysteria, her bloodied hands grasping at Zara's robe. You! This is your fault! Crawling in here with your dark eyes, your lies! Elena's spawn! Tainting everything! Zara flinched, crying muffled against Alexander's chest, the earrings crescent digging into her skin like a talon's reminder. Rage ignited anew, paternal fire consuming remnants of mercy. Alexander shoved Isabella back, not violently, but with the inexorable force of finality, her body crumpling against the desk, a vase toppling in crystalline shatter. Touch her again, and the law takes you, not my hand. The threat landed, cold as the rain-lashed glass, and Isabella curled fetal, wails dissolving to whimpers, the venoms recoil leaving her eviscerated. Regret touched her too, a poisoned chalice, not for Elena's death, but for the throne's collapse, the spotlight dimming on her solitary stage. Alexander turned from her, guiding Zara to the armchair, settling her gently as if she were spun glass. Her eyes, red-rimmed and searching, locked on his. Elena's gaze, demanding the father he'd denied. What now, Dad? The word, Dad, slipped from her lips, tentative and trembling, a bridge extended over the chasm of years. It pierced him, joy and grief entwining like thorns on a rose. The title he'd forfeited, now reclaimed in whisper. Tears renewed, hot tracks down his stubble, but he smiled through them, hand cupping her uninjured cheek. Now, we build. But first, I make right what I broke. Regret wasn't paralysis anymore. It propelled a current sweeping him toward the unthinkable. He crossed to the desk, laptop awakening with a chime, fingers flying over keys with the precision of a surgeon excising rot. Greg's secure line blinked, lawyer, confidant, keeper of skeletons, and Alexander dialed, voice ironclad. Greg, emergency docs, full transfer, Hayes Holdings, all assets, subsidiaries, the works, to Zara Ellis Hayes, effective immediately, no contingencies. The words flowed, irrevocable, each clause a severing of chains he'd forged in Elena's shadow. Greg's sputter crackled through. Alex, that's everything, billions. The board meets now. emergency video, and cameras, live feed from here. Full disclosure. He hung up the click of guillotine's fall and pulled Zara to her feet, her confusion a mirror to his resolve. You're the heir, baby girl. Not scraps, not shadows. The Empire. For Elena. For you. Her breath caught, eyes widening in disbelief, the weight of legacy crashing like the storm outside. But I can't. I'm just my daughter, he cut in, fierce, pulling her into another embrace, her curls tickling his chin. Regret softened to redemption's glow. This act, not vengeance but restitution, handing her the keys he'd hoarded in guilt's vault. Zara clung, sobs easing to shaky exhales. The earrings moon a silent witness to the shift, from orphan to owner, from servant to sovereign. The penthouse mobilized under his command, staff scattering like electrons in a charged field, Hale summoning techs for the broadcast rig, Tomas fetching the ring light from storage, the cook brewing fortitude in chamomile steam. Isabella watched from her corner, a specter in silk and blood, her wails silenced to hollow stares. As the board convened virtually, faces pixelated in suits of shock, Alexander positioned the camera, Zara at his side, her hand in his a talisman against the abyss. The feed went live, unscripted and unflinching, the Hayes logo pulsing behind them like a dying heart. Gentleman, lady, he began, voice steady as the city's undercurrent, eyes locking on the lens with unflinching candor. Tonight, I confess, 15 years ago, I lost the love of my life, Elena Ruiz, to a bridge's mercy. Or so I thought. Sabotage by my wife's hand took her, and our unborn daughter. Gasps echoed through the speakers, shares plummeting in invisible cascades, but Alexander pressed on, regrets catharsis flooding his words. That daughter stands beside me now, Zara Hayes, my blood, hidden in plain sight as our maid. Isabella Hayes, my wife, confessed tonight. Murder, attempted again this morning. He gestured to Zara's bandage, the purple shadow beneath a silent accuser. Isabella's cry pierced the feed, off camera but audible, a banshee's lament. I resign, effective now. All assets transfer to Zara, full control, no golden parachutes, sell if you must, rebuild without my stain. The board erupted, protests, pleas, but he muted them, turning to Zara, microphone catching his whisper. It's yours, girl. The moon's led you here. Lead now. Zara's grip tightened, terror and triumph warring in her chest. The penthouse, once prison, now palace of possibility. Tears fell, but her chin lifted, Elena's fire kindling in her veins. Reporters swarmed the feeds, alerts pinging like fireworks. Hayes' empire crumbles in live confession. Stocks hemorrhaged, headlines screamed, and the city was a cauldron of speculation. Alexander pulled her close as the call ended, the screen fracturing to black, his forehead to hers. I should have given you this life from the start. No more regrets, Zara. We start clean. Joy bloomed tentative in her, the weight of billions lighter than the lift of belonging, father and daughter entwined against the gale. Isabella rose then, staggering toward them, hands outstretched in supplication. Alex, no, our life! But security, Hale's quiet call, materialized, gentle hands guiding her away, her screams fading down the hall to the suite's lock. Regret shadowed her exit, not redemption but ruin. The queen, dethroned by the blood she'd spilled. Alexander watched her go, a final pang of sorrow for the woman he'd loved in error, but resolve hardened him. The unthinkable wasn't destruction, it was rebirth, handing the reins to the one who'd earned them through survival's forge. As the broadcast looped eternally online, the penthouse settled into electric quiet, rain easing to patter. Zara leaned into him, whispering, Dad, thank you. The words sealed it, regret's chains shattering, leaving space for Dawn's promise. Outside, lightning forked one last time, illuminating the skyline. A new empire rising from the ashes, crescents guiding through the liberated night. The penthouse, once a vault of veiled opulence, now echoed with the hollow clamor of collapse, rain's dying patter against the glass, a mocking requiem for the Empire's fall. Alexander Hayes held Zara close in the study's dimming glow, her breath steadying against his chest like a compass, finding north after years adrift. The broadcast's aftershocks reverberated through the ether, stock tickers plummeting in crimson cascades, news alerts pinging like shrapnel across the globe. Hayes' heir revealed in murder confession, screamed the Chirons. Zara's bandaged face pixelated into icons of resilience. Alexander's tear-streaked resolve the face of reckoning. Regret lingered in his bones, not as chains but as a catalyst. The weight of billions transferred, lifting rather than crushing. Yet freedom tasted bittersweet, laced with the ash of what he'd lost, and what justice would yet demand. Zara pulled back, her mahogany eyes searching his, the earring's crescent catching the lamplight like a hesitant star. Dad, the world knows now. Everyone. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but the vertigo of visibility. A girl from Harlem's hidden corners, thrust into spotlights she'd mopped but never claimed. Alexander cupped her face, thumb tracing the bandage's edge with feather-light reverence. Elena's ghost in every line. They know the truth, he murmured, voice roughened by catharsis's grind. Not our shame, but our strength. You, baby girl, you're the light they can't dim. Joy flickered in her, tentative blooms amid the thorns of doubt. The assets, the legacy, tools or traps. 15 years of scraping by, and now this deluge. She leaned into his palm, the paternal touch a salve to the orphan's scars, whispering, "It scares me, all of it." Before he could respond, the elevator dinged, a clarion of consequence. Doors parting to disgorge uniformed officers, badges glinting like judgment's teeth. Hale had called them, the butler's loyalty a quiet blade in the night's fray. The lead detective, a grizzled woman with eyes like weathered granite, scanned the room, shards glittering underfoot, Isabella's wine stain a Rorschach of ruin. "Mr. Hayes, NYPD. We received a tip, 911 dispatch on assault, escalating to homicide confession." "Ma'am?" Her gaze locked on Isabella, who huddled in the corner, robe askew, bloodied hands clasped as if in prayer. The socialite's face crumpled, defiance dissolving to dread, the queen's mask shattering under authority's gaze. It was protection," she stammered, rising on unsteady legs, blonde waves a tangled veil over mascara ruins. Officers flanked her, cuffs at the ready, the click of radios a dirge to her downfall. Alexander stepped forward, Zara's hand in his, a steadying tether, regret's fire tempering to cold steel. He met the detective's eyes, unflinching, the broadcast's raw honesty stealing his spine. "It's all on video. The confession, the attack this morning, her iron on my daughter's face." The word, daughter, landed like a gauntlet, Zara's grip tightening, a silent affirmation amid the storm. Isabella's head snapped up, blue eyes widening in horror. "Daughter? Alex, no, don't do this!" Her plea fractured, raw and ragged, hands outstretched as if to claw back the narrative. But the officers moved, cuffs snapping around her wrist with mechanical finality, the metallic bite echoing her venom's recoil. She thrashed, sobs tearing free. "I loved you. We were everything." Alexander approached, close enough to see the tremble in her lips, the porcelain cracks of a life unraveled. Pity stirred, a final ember for the woman who'd been his harbor in grief's gale, her laughter in sun-dappled vineyards, her hand in his at Gallus' roar. But pity yielded to the inexorable tide of justice, Elena's blood crying from the bridge's depths. He leaned in, voice a whisper honed to ice. "You took Elena from me, Isabella, our child, my world, erased by your fear. Today you scarred her again in our home. No more mercy, no more your shadows." The words landed, a cold absolution, regret's blade severing the last thread. Isabella's wail peaked, body sagging against the officers, her gaze locking on Zara with venomous despair. "Her? That nothing? You'll regret this, Alex. She'll ruin you, like her mother." But the words dissolved into incoherent pleas as they led her away, the elevator swallowing her screams, leaving silence in their wake. Zara shuddered, burying her face in Alexander's shoulder. The cuffs echo a punctuation to her mother's erasure. She hated me before she knew. The hurt bled through, the orphan's wound reopened, but Alexander held her fiercer, his chin resting atop her curls. Hates her prison, baby girl, not ours. You're free now, truly. Regret softened his tone, tears pricking anew, for the girl who'd mopped his regrets, for the years Isabella's jealousy had stolen in tandem with his silence. The penthouse staff dispersed quietly, Hale murmuring, "We'll handle the mess, sir." A nod to the literal and metaphorical debris. Alexander guided Zara to the window, the storm's fury ebbing to drizzle, city lights refracting through rain-streaked glass like fractured diamonds. "Look out there," he said, arm around her shoulders. "That's yours now. Not chains, but choices." She turned, eyes shimmering, the bandage a badge of survival. "The empire. Billions, Dad. What do I do with it? I'm no tycoon, just a girl with a mop and moons." Doubt shadowed her words, the weight of legacy a colossus on slender shoulders. Alexander knelt to her level, taking her hands in his, calluses meeting softness, a father's map to her future. Tears spilled freely now, tracing his stubble like rivers carving canyons. "Money's just paper, Zara. Chains I wore to forget, to build walls around the guilt of losing you and Elena. It bought towers, but not peace, not family." His voice cracked, regret's full measure pouring out. Visions of Elena's belly under Brooklyn moons. The kicks he'd never felt. Zara's foster nights cold without his stories. "I thought power healed. It didn't. It blinded me. To you here, all along. But you survived without it. That's the real empire. Now it's your tool. Scholarships for girls like you were. Art lofts for dreamers like your mom. Break it, rebuild it. Your light, not my shadows." Zara's sob escaped, not sorrow but release, her forehead pressing to his. "You could have left me in the dark. Why give it all?" The question pierced, vulnerability raw, the earrings crescent warm between them. Alexander's tears mingled with hers, salt of shared redemption. "Because regret's a thief, stealing what we owe. I owe you a life unlived, steps I missed, pains I should have eased. This, it's restitution. Freedom from the Sheng-Shich chains that bound us both." He rose, pulling her into an embrace, the city sprawling below like a canvas awaiting her brush. Joy kindled in her chest, tentative flames fanned by his words, the orphan's heart expanding to hold the horizon. Dawn crept in hours later, the storm's remnants a misty veil over Manhattan's awakening. Reporters amassed at the lobby, drones buzzing like vultures, but the penthouse held its breath, a sanctuary in flux. Alexander's phone vibrated ceaselessly, Greg with updates, board remnants scrambling for salvage. But he silenced it, turning to Zara over breakfast in the nook, the shattered cup swept away, coffee steaming anew. "Court's set for week," he said, buttering toast with deliberate calm, the mundane a bulwark against chaos. "Isabella, conspiracy to murder, assault. Long stretch, minimum." Regret tinged the words, a quiet dirge for their shared yesteryears, but Justice's arc felt right, unyielding as the Hudson's flow. Zara nodded, sipping tea, her bandage stark against the morning light. "You forgive her?" The question hung, probing the scars beneath his resolve. Alexander paused, forked midway, eyes distant on the skyline. "Forgive, maybe in time. She took Elena, your mother, from me, but I let her. My silence was the first cut." Tears welled again, unashamed, regret's river ever flowing. "Today I face it publicly, press conference at noon, full story, no spin. For you, for Elena." Zara reached across, hand over his, the touch of a daughter's balm. "Then I'm there, with you." Noon found them at the building's grand lobby, transformed into a media coliseum, cameras flashing like paparazzi lightning, microphones thrusting like spears. Alexander ascended the podium, Zara at his side, her chin high despite the bruise's shadow. The crowd hushed, a sea of expectant faces, reporters, analysts, the curious throng. "Thank you," he began, voice amplified yet intimate, regret woven into every syllable. Last night I confessed sins long buried. My wife, former, took my love, Elena Ruiz, and our unborn child. Sabotage, murder. This morning she assaulted my daughter, Zara Hayes, revealed by truth's light. Gas rippled, flashes blinding. But he pressed on, hand finding Zara's. Zara survived foster shadows, built herself from moons and mercy. She's the heir now, not by blood alone, but by grace. I've transferred everything. Hayes Holdings, her canvas. Questions erupted. Mr. Hayes, regret? Zara, how do you feel? But Alexander turned to her, microphone yielding. Zara stepped forward, voice steady, Elena's fire in her timbre. I feel seen for the first time. My mother left me light. These crescents. She touched the earring, tears glinting. Dad gave it back. Not money, freedom. We'll build better. For single moms, for dreamers dismissed. Applause thundered, not for scandal but salvation. Media murmurs shifting from vultures to voices of acclaim. Redemption in ruins, headlines would purr. Hayes' daughter rises, banners proclaim. Alexander watched her shine, pride swelling past regret's tide. His girl, phoenix from his failures. Back in the penthouse as echoes faded, Alexander drew Zara to the window, the city a glittering apology below. You were magnificent, he whispered, arm around her, tears of release tracing his cheeks. Regret lingered, a quiet companion, but justice's dawn gilded it, Elena smiling from the ether, moons aligned at last. Isabella's trial loomed, a coda to their chaos, but in this moment, father and daughter stood unbroken, the empire remade in light's image. 3 months had etched their quiet alchemy on the penthouse, transforming its sterile grandeur into a husk of echoes, the once impenetrable glass walls now veiling a life in quiet dissolution. Alexander Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline a softened watercolor under autumn's amber haze, rain's memory lingering in the faint patter of leaves against the pane. The space felt vast, empty, a cavern where ghosts had danced and truths had shattered. Yet in its vacancy bloomed a tentative peace, regret's embers banked to warm glow rather than blaze. Papers cluttered the island counter, auction bids finalized, proceeds earmarked for scholarships. Grants for single mothers navigating bridges not of steel but survival, echoes of Elena's unyielding spirit. Selling the penthouse wasn't a loss. It was liberation, the empire's crown traded for seeds of restitution. Alexander's fingers traced the window's cool edge, a faint smile ghosting his lips. The lines around his eyes softened by mornings no longer armored in denial. Zara's laughter floated from the hall, light and unforced, a melody that pierced the hush like sunlight through storm clouds. She emerged, paint-splattered overalls hugging her frame, mahogany curls tied in a haphazard knot, the bandage long replaced by a faint scar, a silver crescent of its own, healed but etched, a badge of battles won. In her hand, a canvas bag bulged with brushes and tubes, the Brooklyn studio's bounty spilling over. Dad, you won't believe it. Lila's class today. They painted moons over the bridge. Tiny hands, big dreams. Her eyes sparkled, Elena's fire undimmed, the weight of billions now a toolkit rather than a throne. Alexander turned, pulling her into a side hug, the embrace easy, habitual, the father's touch a rhythm rediscovered in these reclaimed days. Sounds like trouble. Lila's got your spark. Trouble with a capital T. He ruffled her hair, joy swelling in his chest, pure and unadulterated, regret's shadow yielding to this simple grace. The studio in Brooklyn had been their phoenix nest, a sunlit loft in Dumbo, where cobblestones met the East River's whisper, far from Manhattan's merciless pulse. They'd poured the auction's first fruits into it, walls splashed with murals of Harlem nights and bridge sunrises, easels clustered like old friends. No boardrooms here, only the scratch of charcoal and the hush of creation. Elena's dreams resurrected in pigment and line. Alexander, sleeves rolled to elbows, had traded spreadsheets for palettes, his broad hands once signing fortunes, now coaxing colors from canvas. Elena's profile against twilight, her smile a curve of ochre and gold, Zara's scar a deliberate stroke of indigo resilience. It's therapy, he joked on opening day, but truth laced the quip. Each brush stroke a confession, regret bleeding onto linen in hues of sorrow turned sage. Zara watched him paint, her own works bolder, abstracts of Foster shadows pierced by lunar light, moons in every phase, guiding threads through the dark. Today, as they packed the last of the penthouse boxes labeled for donation, memories sifted like autumn leaves. Zara paused at the study door, the room where truths had detonated now stripped to bones. "You kept the photo?" she asked, nodding to the frame in his hand. Him and Elena, young and entangled under Central Park oaks, her hand on her belly, crescents glinting at her lobes. Alexander nodded, tucking it into a satchel, the image a talisman against forgetfulness. "Always. Your mom. She's in every line we draw." Regret stirred, a gentle tide now, not the tsunami of revelation nights. He'd missed Zara's first sketches, Elena's midnight inspirations, but these strokes reclaimed them, father and daughter co-authoring the narrative. Zara slipped the surviving earring from her lobe, holding it out, silver warm from her skin. "Wear it. With me." He fastened it, the crescent cool against his collarbone, a shared heartbeat sinking in the quiet. "Feels right," he murmured, tears pricking but held, the weight a bridge rather than a burden. Isabella's trial had carved its scar across the weeks, a courtroom drama unfolding in tabloid ink and televised gavels, the penthouse's ghosts summoned to testify. Alexander had sat in the gallery, Zara at his side, her hand in his, a steady pulse amid the legal tempest. Isabella, stripped of silk for stark orange, had entered diminished. Blonde waves severed Toei practical bob, blue eyes hollowed by Riker's chill. Her confessions replayed in sterile detail. The threats to Elena, the mechanic's greased palms, the iron's blistering arc on Zara's cheek. Witnesses paraded, staff with trembling voices recounting her rages, forensics unearthing break-line sabotage from archive files. Isabella's defense crumbled under her own venom. "He was mine!" She'd screamed at sentencing, verdict sealing 25 years, conspiracy and assault etched in an ironclad judgment. Alexander had met her gaze once, across the bar, pity flaring, regret's quiet kin. "You chose your cage," he'd whispered as guards led her away, her final sob a fractured echo of the woman he'd wed. Forgiveness? Not yet, but understanding dawned, her jealousy a mirror to his fears, both prisons self-forged. Zara had wept that night, not for Isabella, but the tangled roots of loss. Mother murdered, surrogate scarred by hate's blind blade. Alexander held her on the penthouse rug, amid packing crates, rocking like she was small again. "Hate's a thief, girl. Stole her from you, me from Elena, but we don't let it steal us." His voice cracked, regret's river flowing free, for the girl he'd left to foster tempests, for Elena's dreams deferred. Zara lifted her head, eyes fierce through tears. "Teach me to forgive, Dad, like you try. For her, for us." The request humbled him, a daughter's grace outpacing his own halting steps. In the studio's quiet hours, he'd shared stories, not polished tales but raw confessions. Elena's laugh in rain-slicked alleys, her hand guiding his over her belly, the voicemail's plea he'd deleted in coward's haste. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," he'd say, brush pausing mid-stroke. "It's planting over the graves, letting light through the cracks." Zara listened, her canvases evolving. Isabella's silhouette, not monster, but mourner, shadows softening to grays of complexity. Now, as dusk deepened, they stood at the window, the city a tapestry of lights unfurling below, Brooklyn's glow calling like a lover's promise. Alexander draped an arm around Zara's shoulders, the earrings twin now matching hers, crescents aligned in silver solidarity. "Regret forged us," he said softly, voice warmed by the vista. "But it doesn't own us. Not anymore." Zara leaned in, head on his shoulder, laughter bubbling anew. "Then what's next? More moons?" Her tease carried weight. The orphan's spark now airs fire. Billions funneled to foundations. Elena Ruiz grants for single mothers, art havens in Harlem lofts, bridges rebuilt in metaphor and mortar. Alexander chuckled, the sound rich, unburdened, tears of gratitude tracing silent paths. Moons, stars, the whole damn sky. Together. The auctioneer's gavel would fall tomorrow, the penthouse consigned to new hands, its walls whispering of scandals turned sagas. But for Alexander and Zara, closure was canvas, not contract, strokes of ochre dawn chasing indigo nights. Regret lingered, a quiet gardener in their soil, but healing's vines climbed higher. Elena's smile in every mural, Zara's laugh in every lesson, Alexander's hands steady in hers. They turned from the window, bags slung over their shoulders, the elevator descending not to depths but horizons. Brooklyn waited, studio lights beckoning, father and daughter stepping into the frame they'd paint anew. Outside, the city exhaled, autumn winds carrying leaves like confetti for the reborn. Moons rose, crescents waxing toward full, guiding the lost home at last. In the loft that night, brushes flew, Elena's portrait blooming under their hands, eyes alive with the love she'd sown. Alexander paused, paint-flecked, watching Zara at a final stroke, a tiny handprint in the corner, theirs intertwined. Perfect, he whispered, pulling her close. The earrings glow, a shared constellation. Healing wasn't erasure. It was inscription, regrets etched into art's eternal lines. As sleep claimed them, the city hummed a lullaby, the haze legacy whispered onward. Not in towers, but in the quiet revolution of hearts mended, moons aligned, a family forged from fire's forgiving ash. As the moons align and shadows fade, our tale of fire-forged family draws to a close, redemption rising from regret's ashes. What hit you hardest, the unthinkable gift, or the healing hues of home? Share your thoughts below. Your stories fuel ours. Thank you for journeying with us. Until next time, keep chasing those crescents. Fade to light.